Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm not hearing you well. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. I hope you had a great time last night. It's a city of democratic resilience and innovation, and I hope you got some tasty food along. Today is the last day, and it's a very important day for us. I want to make a few announcements. So tonight, is a special night. We are here together because we want to express and strengthen our solidarity. So tonight is a night of solidarity. We're going to give Democracy Courage tribute to 3 great democracy movements around the world. So I want you to be here, express your solidarity with them, and enjoy some music and food together. Before we actually enjoy the dinner, I want you to pay attention to a few things. You got the message from me last night. We have some unfortunate incidents. Few people here got tested positive for COVID. So let's be careful. Let's wear masks if you're in the audience, and maintain the social distance and so on. Your safety, public health is very important to us. Next, I made an announcement yesterday that many of you are leaving tomorrow. Those of you leaving tomorrow, we are providing transportation to airport. That information is on the morning tea email that we send out. But if you're not clear about when you take a bus, please go to the Swan room. There's the bus schedule on the wall. And then, of course, keep using social media. Thank you for helping to amplify our voices, your partners' voices. Let's keep doing that. So enjoy today's event. More discussions to provoke your thoughts and expand the imagination. So now, as we think about future, we need to think about new social contract. And Shona from the Solidarity Center will kick off the discussion. So Shona, please take the stage.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to see everyone here. I am so glad to be here at this amazing assembly with so many committed, fantastic activists. And this morning, I'm so thrilled to bring the labor movement into the room. As Maria Ressa has stated, we are possibly watching the last 2 minutes of democracy, and many speakers have noted the decline in democracy over many years, like Freedom House indicators and others. Well, the international labor movement, we in the trade union movement also have an annual report that tracks what that means for workers. And in the last decade, every single year, the fundamental rights of workers to assemble and associate, to speak and to advocate free from harassment and abuse has also declined. Under international labor standards and human rights principles, all workers, without distinction, have the right to freedom of association. In 2022, though, 115 countries excluded workers from this right. And when they have tried to speak up and speak out, they face repression. Workers were arbitrarily arrested or detained for exercising their right to form a union last year in more than 60 countries around the world, and experienced repression in the form of violence in 50 countries. Trade unionists in 2022 alone were murdered in 13 countries on Earth. Labor rights track among the most frequently violated set of human rights on Earth. And like the repression of other civil liberties, this all got worse during the pandemic, when so many governments used the global health crisis as an excuse to further diminish civic space. So, when we're here together and we're all thinking about the future and we're thinking about rebuilding our economies and democracies coming out of this global crisis, like everyone here, independent and democratic labor movements around the world are also thinking about the future of democracy and economic justice. That's why many in the labor movement have called for doing so in the context of a new social contract that recognizes the profound impact of the pandemic in our economies and our societies, and that recognizes power has concentrated further into the hands of less people, and this power is both economic and political. But our vision, our collective vision, is so much stronger than that. Stronger and inclusive future for all. And we are digging in the labor movement, and we are trying to build that. Because in the end, in all the practical ways that unions come together and fight for something better, for a better future, in all the ways our vision collectively is so much more beautiful than the ugly world imagined by the oligarchs and the autocrats. So when we think in broad terms about the concept of a new social contract, building back and up out of the pandemic, we think about it organized around these broad elements. First of all, democracy for our societies and for workers. Labor movements need civil rights and liberties to grow and thrive, and truly sustainable and vibrant democracies need to hear from workers to actually be vibrant and inclusive democracies, which they cannot do if they are repressed. Entire democratic, independent labor movements in Hong Kong, Belarus have been dismantled by regimes and brutally repressed just in the last couple of years, along with labor movements in Ethiopia and Egypt, Iran, and more. Enough is enough. Universal social protection. The world lost virtually all the gains we made globally in eliminating extreme poverty around the world during the pandemic. While at the same time, we also generated the world's first trillionaires. Half of countries provided zero economic support for people who lost their livelihoods in lockdowns, and that's part of the poverty story. We need to build social protection, including for the poorest countries, so that less people are one illness or disaster away from total destitution, and that we can have more resilient economies, which means safety nets for everyone, not just the wealthiest. And something, as a third principle, we call just transition. Rapid technological advancement is changing the nature of work, which has only accelerated during the pandemic. And the climate crisis necessitates massive economic transformation of its own. We want to maximize the social and economic opportunities of climate action, while ensuring that as workers experience the wonders of the fourth industrial revolution and the promise of a healthy planet, that we are building jobs with rights and livelihoods so that we aren't replicating mistakes of the past. Fourth, equality. Research shows that marginalized people in all of our societies were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. But our vision is one of equity and inclusion, one in which democracy finally means gender equality and full economic and political inclusion for everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, and other marginalizations. And finally, economic inclusion means corporate accountability to all of the above. And so with this bold and powerful vision, we are building democracies of the future together with civil society partners, labor movements, allies in government to build back better from this pandemic that works for all people, regardless of socioeconomic status, from the poorest to the wealthiest to everyone in between. And so I'm now going to turn this over to an amazing panel of really, truly wonderful trade union leaders and activists. I'm going to introduce them one at a time to come up on stage. And I want to start with my sister, Kaisar Ang, treasurer of the Confederation of Trade Unions of Myanmar. Please come up, Kaisar. The Confederation of Trade Unions of Myanmar is the largest labor federation in Burma. She is also the president of Industrial Workers Federation of Myanmar. Prior to the military coup, she served as a trade union representative on two national bodies, the Technical Working Group on Labor Law Reform and the Minimum Wage Committee. Welcome. My brother Joshua Mata, Secretary General of Centro. Joshua is the elected leader of this national organization of workers in the Philippines. He's been a trade unionist for 3 decades and has dedicated his life to advancing social movement unionism in the Philippines and is a leading voice there for fair globalization and the advancement of trade and climate justice. And finally, my brother Stuart Applebaum. Stuart is president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union in the United States, which represents 100,000 workers in these sectors. He also is on the board of trustees of the National Endowment for Democracy. He serves as vice president of the American Federation of Labor, which is the largest trade union organization in the United States, and is an officer on 2 global union federations, which are international organizations that bring unions together across borders around the world. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. And I would like to ask my brother Joshua to get us started.
Should I speak here? Oh.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. We have a tradition in the Philippines that I'd like to introduce to everyone in order to focus everyone's attention. When I say, let me stand up. When I say isang bagsak, I'd like you all to bang your table all at the same time, but we have to be organized, okay? So let's try this. Isang bagsak. Oh, come on, come on. You can do better than that, no? We want to change the world. We want to fight for democracy, and we have to be focused. Isang bagsak. One more try. All at the same time. Isang bagsak. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you. All right, labor movement in the house. Okay, so I want to start with getting us started with my sister Kaisar from Myanmar. After such a promising opening in your wonderful country, military rule and repression have returned, and the consequences have been incredibly dire for the labor movement there. And yet, the trade union movement in Myanmar, abroad and in the country, hasn't given up. This is not your first experience with military rule. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal history? What brought you to this leadership position in the labor movement?
Yes, I'm now president of the Industrial Worker Federation of Myanmar, which is mainly member from garment, shoes, and leather sector. But before, when I was young, I was a former garment worker. I started working at 16 years old in a garment factory, which is, the working condition is very bad. And I have to work 13 to 14 hours a day, and 7 days a week, no day off. But we can have a 1 day off in a month after getting the salary. But mostly we were told the order are important to be shipped, so we have to work overtime. So normally I did not have the day off. So, but I only have earned at the time about $10 per month. Even I work for over 100 hours overtime in a month. $10 is not enough even for one woman. So how we can feed our family? But the working situation was like that when I was young. Why it's like that? It was like that because that time Myanmar was under military rule, no democracy at all. And I'm witness for forced labor and harassment, physical harassment, sexual harassment to the women. So my teenager life was very miserable. I feel very bad. And I migrated to Thailand to find a better opportunity for myself. And I work in the garment factory in Thailand. But it is a small factory, and but I only have to work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., but I earn like $180 per month. Actually, in Thailand, we can earn $300 or $400 per month, but in the factory, I can only earn $180. But it is so much different. It was so much different, the salary between Myanmar and the Thai border, working in Thai border. I was like, why was happening like that? And because of this very low salary and working condition, long working hour, it's destroying our community, our family life. And the ethic is destroying people's ethic because people have to make corruption every day. So that was my life when I was young, because no democracy in Myanmar. But I'm in Thai-Burma border, when I worked in garment factory, I was introduced to my organization, at the time called FTUB, Federation of Trade Union Burma, but now Confederation of Trade Union Myanmar, which is the national center in Myanmar. But I attended a training of the FTUB. So before, I did not know Myanmar was under military rule. I did not know about politics. No one in my family, in my environment, worked in politics. So I did not know about the right or democracy. But in the training, first time I learned Myanmar is under military rule. And then people are treated very badly by the military because military want people struggle for their living every day. So that people cannot think to fight back to the military or think about the democracy because they are too busy with their living. So I was like, yes, that makes sense. So we were very busy and we always fighting each other in the family. So then I wanted to make change the situation of working people. As a young people, I wanted to promote myself, and also I want the other young people have a chance to promote themselves. So that's why I was thinking, that trade union, the organizer, he knows what is happening in Myanmar. So he will know how we can make change. So I wanted to learn. Then I became a trade union member in 2007 until now.
And actually, the story of women workers organizing in Myanmar is one of the most uncovered stories of miraculous women's power building anywhere in the world. Unions women trained themselves to stand up to employers and government during periods of repression. And when the military rule came back, they were the first people out there striking and fighting bravely against that repression. So thank you so much, and including you, my sister, Kaiser, you're an inspiration to so many of us, so thank you so much. Joshua, let me turn it over to you. Centro is very focused on building a labor movement dedicated to social justice in the Philippines, and a lot of your work has been actually organizing to help the most vulnerable and marginalized have voice and power in society. I know that the Philippines is repeatedly mentioned in the International Trade Union Confederation's Global Rights Index as one of the worst and most difficult countries to be a trade union leader, and that you personally have experienced the worst effects of that. Can you talk a little bit about your work in a context like that, building voice and power with the most vulnerable?
Well, thank you for that question. But first, I just want to make my impression that what you told us today about low wages, long working hours, no day off, that actually sounds like the condition of many migrant workers in the world. Especially the caretakers here, Filipino caretakers here in Taiwan. We were meeting with them last night, and that's exactly what we heard, right? So it's incredible. Now, going back to the Philippines, I actually thought that in some cases it sounds like the Philippines, in many places in the Philippines. But let me start with this: the Philippines is has one of the best, I should say, has one of the best labor codes in this part of the world. Now I should say that, no? And so that's not our problem. Our problem is that many of these laws are not actually implemented properly. And that's the reason why the Philippines, for the past 5 years now, has consistently been on the top 10 of the ITUC's index for the world's worst country for workers. Why? Well, because while we all have the constitutional right to organize, collectively bargain, and to strike, the fact is precarious work in the country has prevented many workers from accessing that right. More importantly, those who are able to do so would find it so difficult and so dangerous to put up a union, especially during the time of Duterte, the previous madman that we had in our Malacanang. You see, in the Philippines, when you start organizing a union, one of the first things that happens is that you are red tagged. And for those who are not aware of what red tagging is, it means you're immediately accused without any evidence by security forces in the Philippines that you are an organizer or a member of an underground armed communist or terrorist group. Now, in many parts of the country, once you're red tagged, that's like an invitation to many of the paramilitary forces in the area that's your open season, that they can do anything to you, And this red tagging happened at a time when there was so much killings because of the drug war on drugs, where 20,000 to 30,000 people perished, and we don't really know the actual figures, which has created so much climate of impunity that many employers, including big ones, actually used in order to undermine and push back workers' rights. One of the biggest companies in the Philippines that practice red tagging consistently, it's Coca-Cola. Very bad company when it comes to red tagging. So that's the context when we try to build an organization. But we continue to do it simply because workers, you can oppress workers, for some time, but you cannot oppress workers all the time. Workers will always fight back, and that's the reason why we continue to organize workers, not just in the Philippines, but also migrant workers around the world. I'll stop there for now.
Well, actually, that's a really important point. I just want to ask you a quick follow-up on that. I mean, why do workers in the Philippines think about extending these fundamental democratic labor rights to workers in other countries or Filipinos that travel?
Well, we've been through martial law 36 years ago. We know that when you have martial law, many people know that when you have martial law, you have no trade union rights, you have no human rights. And when you have no human rights, then the powers that be can just do anything that they want, right? So for us, it is so important that we build democracy in the country and deepen it. And the only way, the way we see it as workers, the only way that we can actually contribute to building democracy in the country is to build organizations of workers, of unions, who will continue to fight for their rights and ensure that growth that the economy generates would actually, benefit the many workers. There's really a reason why we have so much right-wing governments around the world today. And that's precisely because we have an economic model that has used the race to the bottom as a way to earn profits and exclude most people from the benefits of the growth. And it created so much anxiety, so much anger, which paves the way for demagogues like Duterte, or for example, a joker like Mr. Marcos Jr., to win the hearts and minds of people during elections simply by distorting information. So that's why democracy is so important for us.
Thank you. I was about to actually ask Stuart a similar question. Stuart Applebaum, like in the United States, we are also working on democracy all the time, right? That's the project of the United States, is to constantly work to improve and live up to the promises of democracy. And the labor movement in the US has been central to that for more than 100 years. So maybe we can just step back a little further, though. You're a lifelong labor activist, held elected positions, activist leadership positions in the US and around the world. Why are unions, American unions, for example, and other unions, why are we interested in questions of democracy?
I think it's an important question. And I think that people have to understand that unions themselves are democratic institutions and provide the training ground for democracy for our members. Workers come together within a union. They elect their own leaders. The decisions that are made are done in a democratic way. People vote on the contracts that are going to govern their work lives. And they understand as well that the union provides democracy in the workplace, because no matter who you are treated the same way under a union contract. It makes no difference, your gender, your sexuality, your race, you are treated the same way. And I think that's very important. We are the training ground for democracy, and we only flourish in democracies. In fact, one of the very first things that is done when an authoritarian leader comes in and tries to destroy democracy is to try to destroy the labor movement in their country. We are an essential component for democracy. And we also understand that we cannot talk about democracy unless we are also talking about economic democracy. I think when we look around and see the loss of faith in democratic institutions and democracy itself around the world, what we are also seeing is the breakdown of the social contract. There was a notion that people should be able to go to work a full-time job, and be able to support themselves and their family. That they should be able to go to work each day and know that they will return safe and healthy. And that is no longer the case. The social contract in my country and in so many countries has become frayed, destroyed, and that becomes the breeding ground for populism and extremism and for anti-democratic efforts. We have seen it particularly as a result of the pandemic. Too many workers knew that they were going to work every day, putting their lives at risk. Too many of them died as a result of just going to work each day. They did not have the option of working remotely. And for a while, we would say thank you to them and applaud them. They were essential workers. Society could not have survived without them. But those words were nice, but what would have been even nicer would have been fair compensation and safe working conditions. And I think that's why it's incumbent upon everybody who is concerned about democracy to be concerned about the rights of working people and about economic democracy in their own countries.
Yeah, thank you. I think about that global social contract and the fraying there.
Well said.
In some industrialized countries, it may have looked like social protection and fair wages, but in many post-colonial societies, coming out of that fight for liberation from colonialism, also there was a vision of a social contract, employment protections, rights to all that, and which often disintegrated as well. So it's not just the wealthy countries that have gone through these kinds of transitions. But I want to talk about, we've been talking at kind of national level, I want to pull it back and look at how these questions sort of play out globally as well. And I want to turn back to Kaisar. You know, CTUM does an enormous amount of work on corporate accountability, like sort of at the nexus of like what business does and what human rights look like in a country context, in your case, Myanmar. And so it'd be really great if you could explain a little bit about the trade union efforts to promote corporate accountability in Burma and the ways in which international investment is actually propping up the regime and you're fighting back against that. Can you tell us a little bit about your work specifically in that area?
Yeah, in the nation and communists, the communists, they only think about the profit, I think. But of course, nowadays, because of the dialogue with trade unions and other partners, they are also talking about human rights and other labor standards. They have a code of conduct, which is very good. But this code of conduct, are they in the practice or not? How they can make sure they are code of conduct in their supply chain. But trade union is very important to make sure the code of conduct are in practice. Because in Myanmar case, we were under underground movement when I joined the union, but that was in 2007, but we returned to Myanmar in 2012. And we organize workers, we educate the workers, and we became the national center. So we brought a lot of achievement for the workers, like a minimum wage, 1 day off in a week with pay and social security, and no harassment at the workplace, something like that. We brought a lot for the workers. And not only that, of course, we face a very bad union busting when we do organizing. So at that time, we noticed that there are a lot of international companies, so then factory are doing this. So many trade unions or labor NGOs do not understand to conduct the brands and how to work with them. But we are member of industry or and IDUC, so we reach out to the multinational company and complain that there is a violation of freedom of association and labor rights violation. So we brought many trade union leaders, workers back to the workplace when they are dismissed. And we did a lot of negotiation, and we have a collective bargaining agreement at the workplace level, which is good. And we practice social dialogue. But after the coup, without democracy, we cannot practice any right for the workers or human, because now industries are under martial law. And what the military has done to trade unions, they issue arrest warrants for all the trade union leaders, for the national level leader, sectoral level leader, also regional and factory level. So many of the trade unions are in hiding. And the factories gave trade union lists, not only the leaders, also the member list to the military and the police. So trade union leaders are handed by the military, not only at the workplace, but also at their home in the villages. So we contact to the fashion brands to take their factory, not to give the list to the military. But the response was how the factory refused the order from the military. If the factory don't pay the list, the factory will face a problem. Yes, I agree with that. So that is a very clear example. Can the multinational companies invest in a country where the military dictatorship ruling? It is possible to do due diligence, human rights due diligence in the country. But their brands, many brands are staying in Myanmar, even from US and the EU. They are saying they are protecting worker rights. They are doing due diligence. How? I now cannot go back home. I was out of Myanmar when the coup happened. My passport was cancelled by the military. I have an arrest warrant. And all the organizer and negotiators are in hiding. They are underground movement now. How the brands can protect the worker rights without us, without trade unions? But we collect more than 100 cases of the violation, which is forced labor, wage exploitation, harassment, physically, and or also the sexually. And now we also now see child labor. And now workers became a daily labor, which means no security for the employment. So they are getting about less than $2 per day. So we are now asking the multinational company to leave from Myanmar because they are existing. It's caused harm to the workers. And also they are providing the financial to the military. But also they are giving legitimacy to the military. We people from Myanmar do not recognize the military as a government, but the factory companies are given the legitimacy. So that's why we are asking the brands to leave from Myanmar. But unfortunately, the brands and EU, they are saying they are not supporting the military, but they do, indirectly. So why the businesses are staying in Myanmar, how the EU, the government, supporting democracy movement in Myanmar? We, the trade unions and democratic organizations, are not getting support from the government, from EU. We are asking for the EBA withdrawal, for example. EU, because EBA the GSP is given to Myanmar, like at least developing country, we have to comply ILO and UN conventions. But in Myanmar, you see a lot of killing, arrests, war crime happening committed by the military. The EU did not take action. They are doing the targeted sanction, but that is not enough.
So we see in this context, when we're thinking about a vision, building out of a pandemic, the future of democracy, rights, and economic fairness for everyone, and we see in this example a perfect example of the lack of corporate accountability and global governance of multinationals and investment directly aiding a military regime and directly undermining democratic rights in the country by continuing to invest in propping up a regime. And so we have a few minutes left before we turn over to questions, but along that line of work, Joshua, yesterday you asked a question about how can we work together, globally, activists, responsible investor community, the labor movement, civil society, to really advance a business and human rights, mandatory, beyond due diligence, even human rights perspective in the global economy. I know you do a lot of work on unfair globalization and what the unfair looks like. What is your vision of what it would look like in a great democratic way?
That's an excellent question, but I'd like to take off from what you were saying. I know that there was a time when there was so much craze about corporate social responsibility, and probably they're well-intentioned when they wanted to come up with the corporate social responsibility schemes. But we should now understand that this has failed. This has absolutely failed. Because in many occasions, in many cases, companies would actually use their CSRs as a way, like a PR exercise, to whitewash whatever it is that they are doing. So what we need, I think, to answer your question, I think what we need is to reform our institutions and even create new institutions to make sure that corporations are actually accountable. And that's the reason why we have been pushing for the past 5 or 6 years now. We have been, together with social movements around the world, we have been pushing for legally binding instruments at the United Nations. And what we're saying is that we cannot allow companies to run roughshod over workers' rights everywhere in the world and then get away with it. And therefore there has to be strong laws that would govern and ensure that they would be accountable wherever they go, wherever they go. So that's one way to do it. But on top of that, I really think we need to reform our own institutions at this point in time. Take the case, for example, of the ILO. It's a tripartite body. It's an important body, and it plays and continues to play an important body. But no, we have to make sure that we have to think about how do we make it much more efficient. Because the way the tripartite operates sometimes, it could undermine workers' rights. For example, the ILO is supposed to have its Asia-Pacific meeting in Singapore in December. Not one mention about, not one agenda. It's not on the agenda. The labor rights, it's not on the agenda. It's incredible. How is it possible that in one of the worst places in the world where workers are, if I may use the word, fucked up, why is it that it's not on the agenda? So we need to reform this, even as we continue to fight to deepen democracy in each of our countries. And to do that, while doing that, we have to work together. We have to find a way to work together. We have to find a way to build a truly global movement that we can be, that can actually help, build solidarity, not just strengthen our solidarity at the local level, national level, but even at the global level.
May I follow up on this?
Please.
I think one of the most wonderful things about this assembly is the opportunity people have to network with each other and to create alliances. For labor, this networking, these alliances already exist. Unions come together internationally. We have global groupings of unions who work together on common issues, often against common employers such as Coca-Cola, trying to provide support for the workers in Burma. These are pro-democracy institutions, the global labor movement. And I would like to tell my brothers and sisters from Ukraine, last week we had the global meeting of one of these federations for food workers across the world, and we voted to expel the Russian unions from our federation. You need to be interacting with labor. You need to be interacting with us all the time and supporting the aspirations of working people. And there is something else that's going on right now, too. Working people are standing up in a way we haven't seen in generations. In the United States, we are seeing more strikes and more organizing than we have seen in more than 50 years. And these are democratic expressions of working people who've had enough. And what is amazing for those of us who work in labor is that it is not just labor going to workers and saying we need to come together. It's workers on their own, organically, at companies like Amazon and Starbucks saying we need to make change. And there's a reason for it. Workers are tired of being treated like a disposable commodity. They're tired of being treated like robots under constant surveillance. They're tired of dangerous working conditions brought about by automation that grinds them down physically and psychologically. And they're tired of being thrown crumbs while the corporate elite takes their obscene wealth and goes on joyrides into outer space. But I have to say that the only way, as we all know, that we can make change is through solidarity. None of us is going to be strong enough in our own country, but when we work together in support of the courageous, heroic workers in Burma, and we support our siblings in the Philippines, then together all of us are going to be able to make a difference. There's a meeting taking place next week where workers who work for Amazon all over the world are coming together to coordinate their strategies. And I'll give you a sneak preview of something that is going to be happening. At the end of November each year, there is a day that is called Black Friday, when companies see their sales go up and their profits go up. This year, on Black Friday, you are going to be seeing coordinated strikes by Amazon workers all over the world.
So, look, there's a lot of challenges, but when we come together and we're brave, if we're brave like our sisters and our brothers and our siblings in the labor movement, we can face them together. And a room like this, with the expertise of all these civil society organizations, your political party expertise, your activism, your organizing, your knowledge about technology and how to navigate disinformation, all of that, together with the ground power of workers coming together, is a really powerful possibility for democratic reform in the most repressive countries and economic fairness and justice that we can achieve together. And so I want to really thank the panel, but we have a couple minutes left, and if anyone wants to join this conversation while we still have time, we'd love to hear from you. I'm not sure if there are mics or anyone has a question or comment.
Those who would ask questions would get free lunch.
Okay. Okay, sure.
Morning. My name is Nafisa Touide. I'm a feminist, civil society actor from Niger. In many African countries, collaboration between civil society and the government is becoming more and more difficult. A restriction of civil space does not allow civil society to play its role of monitoring citizen action. What specific strategy can you share with us to build a better social contract between civil society and other stakeholders?
Thank you. Maybe let's just get a couple of questions. We can get people's voices in the room. Were there other comments or questions over here?
My name is Sean Shea, and I used to work with Han Dongfang at China Labor Bulletin in Hong Kong. We used to work on China, and that work has gotten very difficult now. But I wanted to just put China on the map. China is now a big part of global capital. Chinese companies are going all over the world, as you know. And my question was, given that China is an authoritarian state with growing surveillance capacity and so forth, from the point of view of organized labor, do you see Chinese corporate actors as the same as other corporate actors from the US, from Europe? Or do you see them differently, and do you deal with them in a different way? So that's my question.
Great questions. Any other? Can we take one more before we close up? There's a question on this side of the room.
Over at the end, right there. That's quite an exercise.
I know. Sorry.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this inspiring panel. I'm from Ukraine, and we don't have a culture of developed labor unions and of worker cooperation and coordination. And this is certainly because of our Soviet past, when the labor unions were something that simply didn't work, and so it doesn't work now. And I want to ask you what you would suggest as first steps for developing this culture and labor unions, and why is it crucial? Why, is it possible to have the needs of the workers met without creating those labor unions? Thank you.
What amazing questions, and we have so little time to answer them. So I'm going to see, we've got a question about China and Chinese global corporations. We have a question about techniques for actually, like, concretely doing the work of building a new social contract, and this awesome question about Ukraine. I'm going to take the Ukraine one, but I want to see if you all would like to take the China or the techniques for building a new social contract. I'm going to start with my sister and my colleague who asked the question about Ukraine. I would start by saying there is a labor movement in Ukraine. Yeah. It is small. There is an independent labor movement. They are fighting. They have worked extremely hard against this horrendous illegal invasion. Many workers have volunteered service, given all of their resources, and are organizing in the meantime against new laws that are actually undermining rights at the same time. I would say that there's a real possibility in a country like Ukraine to build back better from this horrific invasion when we get there and when we win an economy that is fair and just for everyone. And you won't get it without the collective action of workers at the center of that, making sure that the prosperity of a new open, democratic, and economically strong Ukraine, it has shared prosperity for everyone. So I want to just address that quickly, but who wants to do the 1-minute version of the Chinese overseas investment question?
Well, I thought that was a very interesting question, and my immediate response at this point in time is that I think it's so important for the labor movement, first of all, to build a narrative that looks, a working class narrative that looks at solidarity with the Chinese workers before we talk about China. The most dominant discourse that we see today anywhere, including in my own country, where we are obviously under stressed by the Chinese Communist Party's intrusion in our territorial waters, is the fact that many are thinking from their nationalist and sometimes even racist perspective, and I think that has to stop. We have to realize, we have to understand that what the Chinese Communist Party, what Xi Jinping is doing, is not what necessarily the Chinese working class would want them to do. So we have to start from that perspective. And having said that, we have to find a way to build bridges with the Chinese working class, not necessarily the union appointed by the Communist Party, but to build solidarity with the workers themselves. And then we together, we should try and push back the atrocious situation that they have in their own country, even as we fight their own employers operating in our own country.
Yeah, there's amazing independent organizing that happens every day all over the country, and that is met with violent repression, and yet people continue to fight back and strike and try to build independent voice that we can have solidarity with. So that's a great point, thank you. And on this final question, Stuart?
No, I would just add to the China question. First of all, it's good to hear Han Fengdang's name. He has worked with my union in the past and has taught us a great deal about what is going on in China. We understand that Chinese enterprises are all too often just an extension of the PLA. And that China claims that there is a union structure in China, the All-China Federation of Trade Unions. It's a fraud. We understand that. They try to participate in international bodies. They should not be allowed in because they fail the initial test of what a real union is. And that test is they are not democratic and they do not represent the authentic voice of working people. If I could also go to the question of Ukraine, I want to reemphasize what Shauna said. And that is, we can be very supportive of what the Ukraine government is doing in repelling this obscene invasion. but we also have the right to criticize actions that are being taken by the legislature. And we were really disturbed to hear about the legislation that was passed in Ukraine that would make it more difficult for workers to organize and have a collective voice. And we would ask you to take back the message that to be a democracy, you also have to respect the democratic desires of working people in your country.
And we have to go. I'm so sorry, we're going late. Want to thank everyone. To my feminist sister from Niger, I will come talk to you because I love your question and we didn't have time for it. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you for your excellent questions and your participation. And let's close with the way we close things in the labor movement. Think about your most powerful civil society organizing moment. Put it in your heart, put it in your head. Think about the biggest challenge ahead of you that you want to fight. And on the count of 3, we're going to say solidarity. Ready? 1, 2, 3, solidarity!
Solidarity!
Thank you very much.
Nice work. Well done.
Kalbunur Siddiq is from the Urumqi region of East Turkestan. She was a Mandarin teacher in an elementary school. In 2017, she was sent by the authorities to educate people she was told were illiterate. Kalbunur was first to teach Mandarin at a men's camp between March and September 2017, as well as at a women's camp between September and October of the same year. Kalbunur, who now lives in exile in the Netherlands, estimates that the 2 camps held around 3,000 and 10,000 detainees, respectively. In our interview with Kalbunur, she provided rare insights into the management of China's camp system. But despite her freedom, Kalbunur is still haunted by the abuses she regularly witnessed in the camps.
I mean, we were very choosy in identifying these faces because you cannot talk about young people claiming the democratic space in the Gambia without talking about the likes of the faces that we are seeing in here today. So today we're here bringing young leaders from different parts of the country, both that are in the mainstream civil society and political space, and those that are in the community, championing community development, changing the narrative in the community. So we've brought these minds together to define what is next for the young people in our democratic future. How do we claim the democratic space?
This is called claiming the democratic space. It's not like waiting for the democratic space to be given to us.
It's us taking charge of our affairs, us controlling our sectors.
We don't only need young people to occupy this space, but having competent young people to occupy this space.
The agenda of what is next, I think, is really important, and it entails a lot that has covered a lot of areas that we need to look into as young people.
What is next for Gambian democracy is to see how we can take up affirmative action and commitment to come up with a position paper that would not only be achievable but is attainable, realistic, and also is time-bound.
Coming from different backgrounds, working in different areas, we all have divergent views and we all have our own perspectives of how things should be done better.
So as you can see, they're currently working in a group and where they're identifying certain challenges and solutions, and these solutions that they are identifying, we're going to be using these solutions to develop a country position document that would outline what is it next for democracy for young people in the Gambia.
We want to suggest that the anti-corruption commission bill should be a priority right now to be passed as law in order to promote accountability.
That the government should revamp the entire education system to incorporate TVET, STEM, and also the affordability of tertiary education.
So we want young people to participate in decision-making process in our communities. This will really help.
I believe there is much to be learned, not just from the successes, but also the failures that have come out of all of the experience that we have gathered, not just for the past 5 years, but the past 50-something years. So the leaders that are there right now, they have succeeded in certain ways. They've also failed in certain ways. What do we take from that as young people?
So this What's Next campaign is a global campaign whereby different countries will be having these sessions, and we're going to be identifying the challenges and the opportunities, the way forward, and what is it next for young people around the world.
The recommendations that we come up with as individuals and collectively as civil society can go a long way in ensuring that we are able to attain a model of democracy that we would really be proud of as a country.
Good morning. My name is Mar Nyang. I am the founder and executive director of Gambia Participates, one of the organizations that is involved in the global What's Next campaign. What's Next campaign is an initiative that is supported by the World Movement for Democracy, where 300 young people from 10 different countries came together to create their own spaces, test their ideas, and discuss what is next for their democratic future. Following concerns of democracy erosions around the world, high discontent of democracy within young folks, and the limited opportunities that are there for young people to meaningfully participate in the decision-making process, the What's Next campaign is initiated with the sole objective to empower young people to take strategic political actions in order to achieve their democratic ambitions. Democracy is a constantly evolving process that must be constantly reviewed in order to improve its evolution. And you know, during the What's Next campaign, young people unanimously believe that democracy is the future, but a democracy that must be underpinned by the values of inclusivity, social justice, and accountability. Inclusivity because young people believe that they have been historically marginalized in decision-making process, and they end up being the end user of the policies and decisions that have been made by the government. And policymakers and governments must understand that anything that is made for the youth without the participation of the youth is really not for the youth. Social justice. We believe development must not be centered in a specific geographical location in any democratic space while marginalizing other communities. Marginalized communities must be given access to education, not only basic education, but high and quality education, employment, and then also job opportunities that are created for youth. Accountability. We believe politicians must be held accountable for the promises that they have made when they were vying for political offices, and there must be strong democratic and anti-corruption institutions. For we believe when there is accountability at the end of the tunnel, politicians and governments are less likely to participate in dubious activities. You know, from where I came from in the Gambia, we suffered dictatorship in the hand of a brutal dictator for more than 22 years. And during his 22 years reign, he has been found guilty by a commission for killing more than 200 people. And these people include our family members, friends, those within and outside the country. And let me tell you how we've been working towards strengthening democracy since we democratically removed a dictator in 2016. We at Gambia Participate have been working with communities and young people to provide them with the necessary information and tools for them to meaningfully participate in decision-making processes, such as constitutional reform process, transitional justice, community-led anti-corruption initiatives, and elections. Now, talking about elections, in 2021, we deployed the largest citizen election observation mission, in which 97% of our observers are young people. We believe citizen-led election observation mission strengthened electoral integrity and also boosts the interest of citizens to participate in election, but most importantly, it also boosts the confidence of citizens in the outcome of election results in order to prevent post-election violence. And let me tell you why I said citizen election observation mission boosts the interest of citizens to participate in elections. In 2022, earlier this year, 2 of our election observers ran for parliamentary elections, and one of them happened to be elected as a parliamentarian, now serving as a member of parliament at the Gambia National Assembly. As one of the participants said in the video that have been projected before I came to this stage, that young people must claim the democratic space, but they must not wait for the democratic space to be brought to them. Around the world, from the countries that you came from the country that I came from, young people have been seen as the faces of democracy defenders. And in defending the democracy, they defend the interests of their nations, they defend the interests of not only young people, but the middle-aged generation, the older generation, but also the upcoming generation that will be replacing the young generation. We want government to see us as a partner, but not enemies. We are only an enemy to a government that fails to deliver democracy, or a government that fails to protect the fundamental human rights, or become a threat to other countries. As young people, we believe we wanted to support governments to deliver democracy. And in delivering democracy, we wanted to be part of the decision-making process to help them make policies and decisions that will strengthen democracy. Because we believe if government thrive, economies will thrive, human rights will be protected, and there will be social justice around the world. For that, I thank you for your kind attention.
Hi, are you still awake? Do you feel like you need coffee? Well, we got coffee for you outside. So take a time, and at, let me see, 11 o'clock, you're going to the workshops. In this room, there's a panel discussion talking about how do we build global solidarity, global narrative for Ukrainian solidarity. So if you're interested in that, stay in this room. But before that, go get the coffee, wake yourself up, and see you soon.